I'm so happy the band's doing well. By the way, what's with the hair? Is that part of the new image?
In the dark, I'd like to read his mind.
One of the most prominent indie artists of her generation, Aimee Mann has enjoyed a career spanning over 4 decades in the music industry, but her climb was one of great struggles. This is her story.
Hush, hush, keep it down, down. This is scary. Hush, hush, keep it down, down. This is scary.
Aimee Elizabeth Mann was born in Richmond, Virginia on September 8, 1960. Her early life didn't stay stable for long. By the age of 3, her parents had split. Her mother left after an affair and a pregnancy, and not long after, she was taken out of the country, abducted by her mother and her stepfather, and brought across Europe. She was gone for a year. Her father hired a private investigator who eventually found her in England and brought her back to the US. But nothing would be the same again.
Yeah, I think, and you know, which is tricky because I'm like, well, my experience can't be that bad, right? Like, I didn't like lose all my family in an earthquake or something, but my mother left when I was 3. But I was always also taken away from the other parent, you know, so, and eventually I was returned to my father, but it was after a long period of time, so he was kind of like a stranger. I guess that is traumatic.
That early disruption didn't go away quietly. As an adult, she would be diagnosed with PTSD, with lingering anxiety around travel, an echo of being moved across continents without control. She would not see her mother again until she was 14. And even then, the relationship would not immediately repair. It would take decades before she described forgiveness, saying her mother had been, in her own words, trapped on every side. Mann would grow up in Bon Air, Virginia. She was quiet, withdrawn, the kind of kid who barely spoke. So much so that her family would send her to a psychiatrist. But when she did speak, people noticed. Music came into Mann's life early, almost by accident. At the age of 12, she was stuck in bed with glandular fever and picked up her brother's guitar. That was where it all began. As a teenager, she found her way into David Bowie, Iggy Pop, and Patti Smith, the kind of artists who made reinvention feel possible. Punk and new wave hit her like a permission slip. You could do anything. In 1978, feeling like she did not fit into the normal world, she left Virginia for Boston and enrolled at the Berklee College of Music, studying bass. After about 18 months, she dropped out and joined a Boston punk band, the Young Snakes. She played bass, but didn't fit easily into the scene. Her songwriting leaned melodic, emotional. The band didn't want that. Thus, she moved on, though her breakthrough was yet to come. But already at that point in time, a shape of a voice was forming. A quiet, precise, and impossible to ignore voice, which would lead us into
In the dark, I'd like to read his mind. But I'm frightened of the things I might find.
At Berklee, she helped form a band, Til Tuesday. She played bass, she sang, and she wrote. In 1985, they released Voices Carry. It broke through. The title track climbed the charts. The video dominated MTV. It won Best New Artist. Almost overnight, she became one of the faces of a new era. But even then, something was different. Her songs weren't typical pop songs. They were sharper, more observant, more interested in people than cliches. From the outside, it looked like success. Inside, it was much more complicated. Follow-up albums showed growth, but not the same commercial impact, and after a shift at the record label, their final album was largely abandoned. By 1990, Til Tuesday was over, and once again she was in between momentum and uncertainty. Til Tuesday had given Mann a platform, but not exactly freedom, and that was about to matter more than anything else.
It's a major surprise to me that no artist has ever walked up, taken the elevator up to the 32nd floor in the CBS building and sprayed the entire place with machine gun fire.
Negative thoughts from singer-songwriter Aimee Mann.
Now that Til Tuesday had disbanded, Mann set out on her own. But the industry didn't make it easy. Her record contract kept her locked in place, unable to release new material for years.
You cannot imagine what a loser I felt like a year ago. Truly.
It was a familiar pattern, momentum followed by resistance. When she finally began releasing solo work, it was clear her instincts hadn't changed. If anything, they had sharpened. The songs were quieter, more precise, focused less on hooks but on truth. But that didn't fit neatly into what labels expected. There were disputes, delays, pressure to be something else that she wasn't, and she didn't bend to those rules. By the late 1990s, she had already done the hard part. She had become exactly the kind of songwriter she wanted to be. The question was, would anyone meet her there?
Now when anybody's labeled a difficult artist, I think, a person with integrity. I'm on their side.
Thank you very much.
If the industry thinks you're difficult, you're probably swinging.
By the mid-1990s, Mann's music was starting to drift toward film. She even appeared on screen in a small cameo in The Big Lebowski as the German nihilist who sacrifices her toe.
Steve Hicks and Blanket.
Für mich auch Heilbier 5 Kuchen. Heilbier 5 Kuchen.
She has lingonberry pancakes.
Oh Mann, wenn ich da an Pfannkuchen in Bremen denke.
Ja, was ist dann mit?
Das ist einfach besser, da ist richtige Butter dran, nicht so ein Scheißfleck, das schmeckt so ranzig und kacke.
Around the same time, she met Paul Thomas Anderson, a filmmaker who is widely known throughout Hollywood for his classics like Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood. Anderson would later go on to sit down and write an adaptation of Aimee Mann's songs. This adaptation would end up becoming his magnum opus, Magnolia, released in 1999. Mann's music didn't just appear in Magnolia, it shaped Magnolia. Songs like her cover of One
is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. 2 can be as bad as 1. It's the loneliest number since the number 1.
Songs like Wise Up became part of the emotional architecture of the story itself, so much so that the characters even sing it at one point in the film.
It's not going to stop till you wise up.
And it is in this moment that Aimee Mann's songwriting no longer is operating solely in the background, but is the story itself. Everything comes together and aligns harmoniously. The Magnolia soundtrack would end up getting the gold certification. Save Me would receive an Academy Award nomination. Mann would even go on to perform the song at the Oscars. After years of label conflicts and industry resistance, Mann would finally receive that wider audience, without ever compromising or changing who she is. This was proof that the voice she had spent years protecting could finally connect on a larger scale. And it was so. After Magnolia, Mann finally had momentum, but momentum didn't suddenly fix her relationship with the music industry. While working on Bachelor No. 2, or The Last Remains of the Dodo, the same conflict returned, only now she was less willing to compromise. The album was more controlled, more personal, completely hers, but Geffen Records refused to release it. They didn't hear a hit. Mann heard a finished record, so instead of waiting for permission, she started selling homemade EPs herself while on tour. Burned CDs, mail orders, directly to fans. A DIY response to an industry that kept trying to stall her. Then she walked away entirely. In 1999, she and her longtime manager Michael Hausman founded SuperEgo Records. Not just a label, an escape route. Later, Mann would describe the freedom bluntly. She could finally make the music she wanted, with the songs, artwork, sequencing, and collaborators she chose, without conferring with a bunch of idiots. Using royalties from Magnolia, she bought back the masters to Bachelor No. 2 and released it independently. And it worked. The album sold far beyond expectations for an independent release. Critics embraced it, fans found it, and suddenly, Aimee Mann had proven something the industry kept insisting wasn't possible. You could survive outside the major label system and still build a lasting career. But even after the breakthrough, the pressure didn't disappear. Following the success of Magnolia and Bachelor No. 2, Mann entered a period of depression. A tour bus accident involving a drunk driver left her with intrusive thoughts and worsening anxiety. In 2002, she entered treatment for depression, anxiety, and PTSD connected to her childhood kidnapping. That same year, she released Lost in Space, an album filled with damaged people, isolation, and quiet emotional collapse. Not loudly autobiographical, but unmistakably shaped by what she was living through. And that became one of the defining patterns of her work. Pain transformed into observation, never theatrical, never self-pitying, just truthful and sincere. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, she kept moving forward. The Forgotten Arm turned into a full concept album about two addicts on the run, while Mann herself discovered a love for the sport of boxing. One More Drifter in the Snow reimagined Christmas music with melancholy and warmth, while also including numerous Yuletide classics. Fucking Smilers leaned into brighter arrangements without losing her edge, and Charmer explored manipulation, charisma, and emotional performance. At the same time, her presence kept expanding outward. She appeared in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Portlandia, Steven Universe, but underneath all of it, the songwriting stayed recognizable, careful, dryly humorous, and emotionally exact. In 2013, she founded The Both with Ted Leo. In 2017, she released Mental Illness, a sparse acoustic record whose title was both a joke and confession. The album won Best Folk Album.
Thank you so much. This is really actually quite a shock. Being independent means everything to me, and I can do that because I have a great team of people. So I would like to thank Red in the Orchard and Saxon Company and Michael Hausman, Artist Management, and my producer Paul Bryan, and thank you guys. Very nice.
By that point, there was no longer any separation between the struggles that shaped her life and the work itself. They had become inseparable, and all the better for it. In the 2020s, Mann continued to evolve. Her album, Queens of the Summer Hotel, drew inspiration from Girl Interrupted and psychiatric hospitalization as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Even decades into her career, she was still drawn to the same emotional territory. Dislocation, survival, fragile connection, people trying to understand themselves. Not necessarily because she was trapped in those themes, but because she understood them with empathy and compassion. In 2020, Mann developed a nervous system disorder that caused tinnitus, migraines, dizziness, and nausea, severe enough that she couldn't listen to music for nearly a year. She later connected it to a combination of childhood trauma and the stress of the COVID-19 pandemic. But even then, she kept creating. Unable to fully engage with music, Mann turned towards illustration and visual art as another outlet, another way to process emotion and stay connected to creativity. When one form of expression became difficult, she found another. As of 2026, Mann is still touring regularly. Still writing, still performing, still doing things on her own terms. Not as a nostalgia act, not as someone chasing the past, but as an artist who never stopped evolving. For over 4 decades, she resisted pressure to compromise, fighting for control over her music, her songwriting, and the way her work reached people. And in the process, she became something larger than just a successful musician. She became a blueprint, proof that an independent artist could survive and endure without surrendering what made them unique in the first place. Through every setback, every reinvention, every quiet triumph, she kept the same core philosophy: trust the work. And whether performing in small theaters or standing in front of longtime fans decades into her career, there's still something unmistakable about her presence. The precision, the honesty, the emotional clarity. She never became louder to stay relevant, she simply became more herself. And after everything, it's abundantly clear: Aimee Mann isn't fading away anytime soon. If anything, she's still exactly where she was always meant to be.
It struck me down like radium, like Peter Pan or Superman. You will come to save me. Come on and save me. If you could save me from the ranks of the freaks who suspect they could never love